Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I teach all about homeschooling all over the world. I also teach about parenting, usually through the lens of the principle self-government. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 cultures for great homeschooling. Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and I homeschool my children. I have always homeschooled my children, and I know what makes a great homeschool. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 5 cultures of great homeschooling. I teach at homeschooling conferences all over the world. Homeschooling is definitely on the rise, and people want to know what makes a great homeschool. Well, I'd like to share that with you today. I've got a lot of things that we can talk about. We're going to spend some time talking about education and what makes a great education and how to help your children take ownership of their own education, and then some key things that you can do culturally in your home to make sure that you are delivering that great education to your children too. Now, one thing about education that you need to know is education is actually a choice. You can't inflict it upon another person. People choose to learn. So that means that I can set up an environment where great learning is possible, and the person could still decide that they're not going to be doing it that day. They could be falling asleep during my education. That could very easily happen. So education means the person is engaging their brain. They're deciding to take information in, process it, hook it to other pieces in their brain, connect those synapses. If it doesn't happen, there's really nothing that you can do about it. But you can work on the environment that really encourages the person to learn a lot. Now, there are different types of learning. There's also different methods that people use for learning, but I'm going to share with you some philosophies of education that I think are going to be really powerful to you. Before we can talk about what really makes a great culture, we need to understand the different phases of learning. Years ago, when I first started homeschooling my children, I attended my first homeschool conference, and there was a man speaking. His name was Oliver DeMille. So Oliver DeMille was doing a presentation all about the conveyor belt education and how a conveyor belt education is not the same as a competitive education, which is more like the private school, or what he called a leadership education. He basically said you could have a conveyor belt education anywhere, but a leadership education required some certain characteristics. You needed to understand how a person learned, and the person learning even needed to know how they learned. And this was going to make a big difference in their whole learning experience. And you know what? He was right. So I bought his book called A Thomas Jefferson Education, and I read it, and I started using his philosophies for education. Well, they weren't really his. I mean, he took a whole bunch of philosophies of education, and then he compiled them together and made a really great structure that anybody could use. Now, you could grab all kinds of curriculum and books and different things and apply them to the philosophies of education that he was talking about. The thing I want to focus on most today, though, is what those phases of learning are. So he had a book, A Thomas Jefferson Education. That's book number 1 that I would recommend reading. Book number 2 was his book called The Phases of Learning. He also had one for teens called TJ Ed for Teens. He had one called The Thomas Jefferson Education Companion. Those are the 4 books that would be relating most to this topic of homeschooling. I know he's written other things, but let's talk about the phases of learning, because it's super important that we understand those different phases of learning. The phases of learning are: first, core phase. Core phase happens between the ages of 0 and 8 years old. Give or take 100 years, he used to always say. So when a person is in core phase, they learn what's right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. And they learn those things through doing work and play. So play is going to be learning to read. Work is going to be doing the laundry, pulling weeds, and working alongside the parents. And they learn right, good, and true. Those are important lessons, and they're all different from each other. This was eye-opening to me. I thought, that's right. That's where we want to start with. That helps a child be prepared to learn the principles and values, morals, and standards that they need for success in life. This is what they learn first. Think of like the core of the earth. He calls it core phase. The next layer outside the core is what he called love of learning phase. So in love of learning phase, this normally happens between the ages of 8 and 12 years old. This is where they learn lots. They're ravenously gathering up information, but they don't finish it all. They just sample it. They experience Play-Doh, and I'm talking about Play-Doh and Play-Doh, okay? They are experiencing everything. They flit from thing to thing like a bee flits to the flowers. So they may start one book, not finish it. Start building something, not finish it. Create their own recipe, create their own song as they're composing something and then not finish it. This is very common because they are getting ready to learn more. They have to start hooking all those dots together and decide that learning is fun. So this is the love of learning phase. And if a person never goes through this, they might have to go through it when they're 55 or 85 or 105. People have to go through these phases of learning in order to finally get the full educational experience. The next phase of learning that might happen in your home or in your homeschool is what he called the scholar phase. The scholar phase of learning usually happens between the ages of 12 and 18, although again, give or take 100 years, that person is going to be learning how they really learn. They're finally getting into it. They are strapping on their learning caps and they're saying, okay, I'm missing the skill called grammar. I'm missing the skill called, square roots. I need to know better how to write a paper. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to take on a project and I'm going to do some project-based learning, maybe some memorization, stuff like that. I'm going to be in a play. I'm going to start a business and they're going to start doing more and more. They're going to read more and more classics and stuff like that. And they are going to put in more time. Their social time might decrease just a little bit as they are putting in more time with their studies because they are going to be studying anywhere from 6 to 12 hours a day. And they will go through different phases during just this one scholar phase as well. And then after that comes depth phase, which is usually getting the degree in college. Then comes mission phase, where you are, trying to go out and make the world a better place in a way where you're like, okay, this is what I think I'm supposed to do. And then after that comes impact phase, where you see other people now picking up what it is that you were doing and starting to do it too, which is super powerful, which is what I'm at. I'm at that impact phase where now people are teaching the things that I teach to other people. And it's very exciting to see. In your home, probably it's going to be those first 3 phases of learning, but you have to teach your children, what are all these phases of learning? What do they look like? And by the way, I have brushed over it. There's a lot more information there, okay? I don't want you to think that I've given you everything because I absolutely have not. So let's talk about how we present that to our children and then how to set up the culture in our home so that children can really go through these phases and get a great education. Before we talk about how to teach these phases to our children and about how they can get these phases through the cultures that we're going to be discussing, click the subscribe button. So this channel is dedicated to strengthening your family, and homeschool is all about family. It's all about the bonds you have, the way that you connect, solve problems, and interact with each other, and that's what this whole channel is about. There are videos that are specific to homeschool, but most of them are just specific to family and communication within the family. I think you'll enjoy them, so click subscribe now. I believe in being deliberate. A self-governed person is deliberate, and that's what I'm known for, teaching self-government principles and skills when I related to parenting and, well, homeschool and everything else. So as a deliberate homeschool parent, then what I did is I took my children aside every single year, oftentimes multiple times a year, and we would talk about the phases of learning, and then I would ask them which phase they thought they were in. And they would do an honest assessment because they knew they couldn't do some of the cool things that scholars do if they really still are just a love of learner. And if they're transitioning between the two, they would know it's going to be some of each, right? And so they would maybe say, I think I'm kind of transitioning because I really do want to read more and I want to learn more. So they would take their own education into their own hands. I told them it's up to you to learn. Remember that. You can do your best on the environment, but they have to choose it day in, day out. And if they don't get the education they want, luckily it's never too late, but it's also somewhat on them, right? So the children make a decision where they think they're at, and then we gear their homeschool journey to that decision. And we do that by incorporating 5 cultures into our home life, because really your homeschool, it's just your family life, isn't it? That's what it should be, at least. If you segregate the two, you're kind of missing out, because homeschool can really happen all the hours of the day if you structure things correctly. The first culture of a great homeschool is pre-teaching. This means preparing ahead of time. So as with parenting, you pre-teach ahead of time for how you're going to solve the problems. You're going to pre-teach how you're going to run your homeschool day. So we're talking about scheduling, we're talking about the areas of focus that we need to be focusing on, but also how we're going to solve problems when it relates to also the communications that we have. So you're going to pre-teach skills that your children need for success. Skills that I teach in my self-government program are very helpful. Skills like following instructions, accepting no answers and criticism, accepting consequences, and disagreeing appropriately. These are going to be things that you're going to pre-teach your children ahead of time so that they know how you will solve problems in the moment. This also means you need to pre-teach them your parenting skills and what they're going to need there as well. You're also going to pre-teach them what the school day is going to look like, right? How are you going to structure the time? Then we're going to talk about each week what they want to accomplish with their week. Now, 2 times a year, we have what we call the time where we make a big list. My children sit down with me and we write down all the things they want to learn, all the places they want to go. We make a big, huge list. And then we incorporate that list into what we think we're going to be doing with our school days. Then each week, we have another meeting. This meeting is something that I call a mentor meeting, and I teach how to do these mentor meetings in my TSG parenting course and in my book, Parenting a House United. I also have journals that have the family meeting formats in it that you can follow. So anyway, we have these weekly meetings, me and my husband and the child, and we take that big list and we put things into our weekly schedule and our plan for the week. And then they hold themselves accountable each day by checking up with me each day on how they've done during their independent study time. And we have a checkup weekly so that they can say, how did I do at accomplishing my goals for the week? So we set goals related to academics, but also related to behavior or social and family, to spiritual also, and they set personal goals as well. These are important things that they can pre-teach for their life, and then we just have to follow up. The second culture for creating a great homeschool is teaching your children how to solve problems. And I don't just mean math problems. I mean problems in general. Talk a lot about the things that they could be facing in their studies. Could they get overwhelmed sometime? How do they solve that problem? Could they not be in the mood or bored sometime? How do they solve that problem? Prepare your child ahead of time. There is a skill set that I teach in my TSG parenting course called SODAs. This is a problem-solving skill set where you teach a person to analyze the situation, options, disadvantages, advantages, and solutions. Did you notice the SODAS, SODAs, in those words that I just said? So this is a way to help develop the prefrontal cortex so the person is able to solve their problems throughout the school day. If they start emotionally shutting down or socially having struggles because they don't know how to solve their problems, they're going to struggle academically as well. And your family culture could end up turning into a battle zone over silly things like math instead of being this unified, inspiring environment, which it really needs to be. The third culture of a really great homeschooler is the culture of discussion. Every great learning environment involves discussion. So if you just read and go along at your own pace and never talk to anybody about what you're doing, you become very isolated in your thoughts and they don't turn into new thoughts. So great educators from the past recognized that discussion was super important. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said, you speak first, then you write. That's how you get your ideas out and make sure that the ideas are sound. First, you speak them out, you discuss them with someone, then you turn them into something written. And then you might evaluate them and discuss them again and then then write them again, but it always starts with the verbalization or the discussion of those ideas. So discuss, find ways and times to discuss. In our family, we have a time every morning called Canon. It's part of our homeschool schedule. And in this time, we will discuss scripture, we discuss writers that are great writers, we discuss current events, we memorize things and discuss the things that we're memorizing that I think might be good for our character development. We also discuss our family, who we're becoming as a group in our family, and we make plans for strengthening our family relationships. We also have weekly meetings. As a family, we have family meetings where we discuss further our family and how we can improve our family culture to make sure that we have the greatest culture for unity possible. So discussion is huge. Read with the children, discuss. Charlotte Mason calls that narration. You can do it verbally, you can do it written. You don't have to make the child do it. You can do it as a group. So make sure that you're talking openly about things, and then your children will actually get more out of every single moment of their homeschool day. Culture number 4 is connection. So in order to connect with your children, even when things have gone wrong, we have to create a correction culture that also is a connection culture. So when you're correcting your children, we want to keep our tolerances low, which means we want to correct more things, not less. That doesn't mean micromanaging or nagging. It just means noticing what needs our attention, what we need to talk about and do some teaching about, and then making sure that that teaching actually happens. And then making sure that our corrections have a tone of unity and calmness, as well as some really solid teaching, something that they can duplicate going forward to make sure that they make a change. If your family culture has a correction connection culture instead of just a plain old discipline culture, then you will actually feel like the moments, even when you need to course correct, are actually positive moments. So I always tell people you should feel closer to your children during and after a correction than you even did before. And I think some people think maybe that's not possible, but it is possible, especially if you have deliberately talked about how you will correct things with the children and what type of feeling those corrections are supposed to have. So look in each other's eyes and establish good corrections and good connections on a regular basis. The 5th culture for great homeschooling is actually having the keys for a real education. I was so grateful to Oliver DeMille. After I read his books, I heard him speak one time about what he called the 7 keys of great teaching. I believe at one point he moved it to 8 keys of great teaching. I'm going to share some of those with you now. You can obviously go look that up. And I think he talks about those keys of great teaching, if I remember properly, in his book, The Phases of Learning. So you can also find those there. But some of those keys of great teaching are things that really are revolutionary for homeschoolers or really all educators. One of the keys is you, not them. You, not them. If you are not inspired, they won't be inspired either. So that means you need to be studying things that are inspiring to you and sharing those inspirational things to the children so that they can see what inspiration feels like and they can start being pointed in a direction that feels comfortable and inspiring. Because one of the other keys of great teaching is inspire, not require. And it's not inspiring to be the dumbest person you know, or the person who's read the least amount of books. That's not inspiring. So a great parent who, if they want to inspire their child, they read their child books. They do it for them and for their child. They read and they discuss. And they expose their children to new things and they discuss. If you are reading to your children, Archimedes and the Door of Science, before the child can even read that book, the child feels like they know something that other people don't know. And you know what? That's inspiring. Now, that doesn't mean that a task list cannot be inspiring. It can be, but for most people, it gets a little mundane after a while. My 2 youngest children loved checking off lists. Loved it. So if they had a list that they made for themselves to do each morning and they could check it all off, they were incredibly inspired. So they were motivated by that. My oldest 2 children, not so much. So keep that in mind as you are trying to inspire the children. And just remember, whatever you get inspired about, they will likely find inspiring also. So those are just two of the keys of great teaching. There are others, such as classics, not textbooks. So in our homeschool, I usually didn't read anything written after 1970, unless it was a current book like something by Oliver DeMille that I had already checked and I recognized, okay, this is a modern classic. It has all of the elements of being a classic. Classic is not just old book. Classic is an inspirational book that changes you every time you read it, that you could read again and again and get something new out of. What that means is you want to make sure you're picking the right type of literature for your children. Textbooks, they don't offer that. They're just information. And even if the information is factual and maybe even culturally relevant to learn, if it's not inspirational, it's going to kill learning. So go to a true source, read somebody's journal, read a piece of literature about that period in time in history, as opposed to just studying the facts of history, which can seem kind of dry. DeMille also taught things like quality and not conformity, many other things, mentors, not teachers, and what the differences between those two things meant. But the one I want to focus on here the most is time, not content. This one made a huge difference for me. So if you schedule time, not content, you have a greater chance of keeping in the realm of inspiration. So if you want to inspire your child, you can't juice everything to the last drop every single time. So if you tell your child, well, you need to get done with the whole math lesson, that's overwhelming, especially if this is a new type of lesson or it seems harder suddenly, then they can't do it. They feel like they can't do it because immediately if they get overwhelmed, they go to midbrain. Midbrain means they shut off some of the prefrontal cortex. They can't think. It's just going to make it harder. So what we did is we scheduled time, and I would say, okay, we're going to do 20 minutes of math. Doesn't matter if you get one problem done in 20 minutes. You could get 3 lessons done in 20 minutes if you wanted to, or if the lessons lent themselves to that. So, do whatever you feel like you can in the 20 minutes, but we're just doing the 20 minutes. And then at the end of 20 minutes, even if they want to keep going, I might say something like, well, no, we need to move on to something else. But later, during your independent time, if you want to put in some more time on this, you definitely can. Whoa, mom's telling me no on math? What? Suddenly I want to do the math. I want to do more of it. It's something called an academic no, and it can be very inspiring to somebody who's inspired in the minute. So putting in that time instead of having to get to the end of everything makes a big difference. Now think of homework. What is the whole point of homework in the public school? The whole point is you have to get to the end of all of it and then have your parents sign it. And then bring it back. It's all just get to the end, get to the end, get to the end. And that's why people lie and they cheat and they fake their way through, because they know they just have to get to the end. It's not about what they got out of it at all. But if your learning is about how to learn and not just what to get through, if you're hoping to get the learning through you instead, which is something that I feel passionate about, then you know that it really is better to focus on putting in a period of time and getting as much through you as possible, as opposed to just getting through it as quickly as possible. I could go on and on about this topic. It is super important to understand how people learn and the culture and environment that learning happens. If you want to know something that kills the environment, then I've got a video for you. The next video is called The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success, and it talks about how we get trapped and how we kill our own motivation every day, sometimes without even knowing it. So click on the video to The Expectation Trap versus the Cycle for Success now, and you will hopefully be able to combat or steer clear of some of those traps that could get in the way of having your perfect homeschool day.